Welcome to Stories That Matter. I'm your host, Doug Thompson. My special guest today is Dan Holliday, president and co-founder of the Storm Report. Dan, welcome.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate you having us.
Well, glad to have you. You know, we listen to you and your staff on the radio all the time, and any time that the weather gets bad, or even if it's good, whatever it's going to be, we'll always listen for it. And you've got such a staff with such clarity to it, and it's just fun to listen to. And so when we had the chance, I said, you know, we listened to Sally, we listened to Jennifer, we listened to Dan, we listened to everybody on that program. I said, let's see if we can find what they look like and hear more about this, how they go about it, because the only time you get any feedback probably is you said it was going to rain today and it didn't, or you said it wasn't going to rain today and it rained. Other than that, why, it's, you know, if you're dead on with it, why, okay, that's what they told us, so way to go. Now, you've got a unique system here with you're the co-founder of the Storm Report, so tell me about it. Tell me about how you got into this. Tell me about the Storm Report.
I think it would go all the way back to when I was about 5 years old. I grew up on a farm in Butler County, Kansas. And growing up on the farm, saw all different kinds of weather, how it affected us, the cattle, the livestock, everything we did from day to day. And I also had a passion for wanting to be on the radio at that age, and eventually got my first job at a radio station at 16, and was I remember there was a tornado warning issued at that time from the Weather Service, and the owner of the radio station sent a staff member out to go storm spotting, and I had never really covered severe weather before. And he said, "You're going to have to go live during this tornado warning." And I said, "What do I say?" And he said, "You just need to stay on the air, explain what's happening until it's over." And I thought, this is kind of exciting. And it wound up going on for an hour. And here I was, 16 years old, ad-libbing through the hour of it. And when I got done, I said, I want to do this forever. And it was fun and it was challenging. And so that's kind of how it got started. As far as the business, I worked through several different radio stations and got to a point where I saw the dynamics of the radio business changing a little bit. Went back to school for meteorology and thought, you know, there's a need for radio broadcasters who are meteorologists to provide this service. And that's how it got started.
Well, okay, let's back up on that one just a little bit. I get it, you're a farm kid, and then you land a job at was it a local radio station, KOYY?
That's correct, yes.
And what was their range?
The range of the radio station, I want to say they were about 50 miles. It was an AM 500 watt station, and then they had an FM station too. But overall, they covered mainly Butler County.
Okay. All right, that had to be kind of a thrill. Did you have to go through some sort of an audition to, you just go to the radio station and say, I can do this? And they just said, here's the mic, or did you go through it? How'd that happen?
I first applied when I was 12 years old, and I got a letter back and said, there's a law against hiring people this young. We need you to get a little bit more age under your belt and come back and see us when you're 16. And I went to the radio station, and I met a lady by the name of Jean Plummer, who had become the program director. And Jean and I still talk today from time to time. And she said, "I'm sorry, we just don't have any openings." And I said, "Well, do you have an opening if I can work for free?" And she said, "Well, I think we can find a way to make that happen." And that's how it started.
That's a good one. That's a good one. And so how long did you work for that radio station?
So I worked for free for about 3 months, and then somebody finally left and wound up working for about $3 and something an hour part-time after school every day, and was there until, oh gosh, I was probably 17 years old, still in high school, and then I left to work part-time for a station on the weekends in Wichita after that.
And was that KZSN?
It was actually a station at the time called KKRD, and it was a top 40 pop station, and it was where every kid that was 17 years old would have dreamed to work at. And so I did the 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. shift overnight on a Friday night, Saturday night for a while.
Wow. Well, that would have been a dream for most kids because you're playing the music.
Yes, yes, you were playing the '80s pop hits at the time that everybody loved to hear, and it was so it was exciting. But eventually wound up at KZSN several years later.
Now, as you got a little bit older and you're still a teenager, now you're working at a 2 o'clock in the morning till 6 o'clock in the morning on the weekend. Was it Friday, Saturday, or just Friday?
I believe, sometimes it varied depending upon someone, if someone got ill or they needed an extra fill in, but it was typically a couple of times a weekend, yes.
Were you still a farm kid?
I was, yeah. I was in 4-H for about 10 years, and so I was still involved in that up until maybe about 18 or 19 years old, and then I think 19 is about the limit, or at least it was then for 4-H.
Okay, all right. Well, I suppose your parents would be able to listen when you'd say, well, hey, listen, I'm going to go to work Friday night. I won't be home till 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning maybe, and they're looking at you. But then they realized they could turn on the radio, and there you would be, so they knew where you were. That kind of kept you out of trouble, like the kind of trouble that most of us got into when we were teenagers. You kind of avoided that by working Friday nights and Saturday nights.
Well, yeah, and I definitely had a curfew as a senior in high school, and so if I wasn't working a certain weekend, I had to adhere to that. But you're right, yeah, they wanted to keep tabs and make sure I got there and back safely because that was about a 30-minute drive from where I lived. So,
Well, that's pretty significant, especially at that hour of the day because there's deer and other animals out on the road.
absolutely.
So at some point in time, you moved to Kansas City. How old were you then? Had you graduated from high school?
Yes, so I was in Wichita. I spent a long time at KZSN in Wichita, which was a country station, still is today, from 1992 to 2004. Got an opportunity to come to a station in Kansas City. But before leaving Wichita, I decided I want to see if I can do a distance learning online program for meteorology. Wanted to go back to school for that. So I started that program while I was working full time and moved to Kansas City in 2004. So it was some schooling and some working at the same time.
Well, let me back up for one little part about this. When you were in Wichita, working for the station, were you, in addition to being on air, were you a music director or any other jobs you held?
Yes, when I was at KZSN in Wichita, that was probably one of the most exciting parts of that job is helping decide the music that got played on the radio station. That was a country station, and through the '90s, that was a very vibrant and exciting format to be involved in, and seeing a lot of the superstars we know today in their infancy back then as they traveled through on what we called the dog and pony show. They came through with bringing donuts, hoping you'd listen to their song and giving them a chance. And a lot of those went on to be big stars. But that was an exciting part of that job, and also being a disc jockey at the time. And it was just a really, really neat time to be in radio, at least as a disc jockey.
Who were some of the people, the people that went on to be stars when they're singing, with their singing ability? Who did you run into that sticks to your mind?
Oh, well, first of all, I can remember Kenny Chesney, who plays stadiums today, and
Sure.
He came through with a guitar and was pretty nervous when he first played with just he and a guitar. And we went out later that evening at a restaurant in Wichita with his record representative, and we had discussions that we were listening to the overhead speaker at the restaurant of all these songs, and we had a contest to guess if we could figure out who the artist was before the other one was. And that's one. Shania Twain, Toby Keith. I can remember them all coming in. Tim McGraw, very nervous at the time because they were hoping that they could get your attention, and you just didn't know how they were going to do. I mean, it was all up to the public at that point, and so it was funny seeing them from the time that they walked in nervous to seeing them on stages in front of tens of thousands of people later. And it makes you kind of happy, to see that all they worked for came true.
And the work that you did to help them by getting the music out, because that's the way that it worked at that time in history. That's awesome.
Sure.
So you were in Kansas City then you went to Kansas City KFKF FM, and what did you do then? Were you afternoon or night?
So I did the afternoon show. I got a call from the program director at that time in 2003, Dale Carter, who is still there today. And he called and he said, "How would you like to come up here and do this?" And that was to move from Wichita to Kansas City, was especially into that afternoon show, was a very, very incredible opportunity. So I was grateful for that. And I was there for 7 years. And at the same time was thinking about where can we take this weather, idea once I finished school and in 2006. And so kind of playing both disc jockey and trying to do weather education at the same time.
Well, with 2006, what was what degree did you earn?
So it was a certificate in broadcast meteorology. It was a certification from the American Meteorological Society. So an AMS seal of approval for broadcasting. And there's several different levels of testing that you have to go through. But it was about 4 years worth of education crammed in 3 years. And it was a challenge to do while working full time, but it certainly was very, very educational.
Was that through Mississippi State?
It was.
Awesome. And then that made you a member of, what would that have been, the National Weather Association?
Yeah, you can become a member of that, but then also, they in the American Meteorological Society, they allow you to receive a seal of approval based on your peers for the broadcast that you do. And so, I received that radio seal as well and became a member. And so just kind of from there, just started doing weather on the radio on the station I was on, KFKF, around the clock. And that's kind of how that all started.
So tell me about how this came about and how all of this works and the people that help you with it, because I hear constantly on the radio, if I'm listening to the Christian Network, KJIL, which I do, while I'll hear Sally Russell.
I'm meteorologist Sally Russell.
Jennifer Naramore.
I'm meteorologist Jennifer Naramore.
And others.
I'm meteorologist Steve Hamilton on today.
I'm meteorologist Ann Holliday.
So tell me about all of this, because this is really interesting.
Well, thank you. The idea actually almost fell into place by accident. And I tried this idea of providing weather for radio stations back in the early 90s, before I went back to school for weather. The idea did well. However, the technology for delivery was not there yet. We were very early in the infancy of the internet. And so when I tried to get it off the ground, the timing didn't work. It was frustrating, and I just thought, I don't know if this idea is ever going to be able to do what I want it to do. Fast forward to 2005, I became friends with a guy who wanted to form sort of a business partnership together. And he said, that idea you had, you should try it now because the internet is far more vibrant and things are taking off. And I said, I just don't know. That was such a battle, And he said, why don't you try with one thing? We started with an extreme weather feature called the Storm Report. It was all about the very extreme weather that happened across the country the day before and what might happen the next day. And we launched with that little short feature on radio stations, about 33 stations, on March 1st, 2005. And the radio stations began asking us, that's fine, you do this feature, but we would like it if you would do our forecasts as well. And I thought, my gosh, I'm working a full-time job and I'm doing this feature and I'm still going to school, and how are we going to do this? But eventually, by about 2007 and 8, one became two, became three stations, and eventually it took off. And for about up until 2012, it was 100% just me doing it. So it was I didn't have the help yet that I had today.
And so when did that change over to where you got in the position that I need more help to do this? And how does this work? How do you get the information? I mean, what do you look at that tells you what the weather's going to be? And then I'm assuming from what you're telling me is that there was so many demands that you needed more people to do it.
Yes. Well, first question to answer that, there's a lot of data that you can subscribe to, and there's data now that's free from the National Weather Service and from NOAA. And there are different feeds that we get of that, everything from satellite imagery to radar to forecasts to long-range forecasts, severe weather outlooks. And that's readily available now. That was another thing that was very expensive back in the early 90s to subscribe to that's not today. And it's one of the things that our tax dollars go to provide all of us. So that's helpful. And so the next step was I was balancing about all that I could when in 2012 I decided to put an ad in a radio trade publication to look for a couple of meteorologists. It just so happened that they were making changes within the Weather Channel, downsizing the number of radio stations they did weather for, and letting go of some of their people. It happened the day after I placed the ad. At that time, Sally Russell and Jennifer Naramore were veterans at the Weather Channel, and they said, "I just read your ad. I would love to see if we could work together." And as these stations started falling in our lap that we acquired, they became available to do the work. And so they joined, us, and it really happened in just a matter of 3 days. I mean, that's how fast it happened and everything changed.
How many radio stations are you on now between you and your team?
I would say there's approximately about 230 stations in about 70 different markets.
Wow.
And it, we sometimes we'll do a forecast that runs on several stations at once. We'll play on 4 or 5 of them, and it will be so it probably sounds like a lot more work than it is, but thankfully I have, 3 great full-time people in addition to Sally and Jennifer, Steve Hamilton, and there are some other part-time folks that work in Wichita and Milwaukee out of their studios. And so, yeah, it's wound up being much more than I expected. I can say that.
Well, so would your staff all have a studio similar to what you have that they can check what the National Weather Bureau has posted, and then from that they begin to refine? Because I'm assuming 200 plus stations, that must cover a pretty wide area. How far is that area going? Multi-state?
It is, yeah. I mean, we have stations in near Sacramento, California, all the way down to New Orleans, Baton Rouge, to the coast of Florida, and even got a new one the other day in Cape Cod. So it's but most of them we have here close to home. And in front of me right now, I have a satellite map where we can watch everything going on around the country. And ultimately, everything going on around the country affects what happens here close to home in the Kansas, Missouri area. So we're all watching everything around the country, and that's what we do. And so there's like I say, a lot of data that we look at, and oftentimes we'll think, boy, that storm is moving close to western North Dakota. I bet we need to check in and see if they need an update. And so this time of year, it can get very, very active, as you know, with severe weather in the spring and summer. So this will keep us on our toes for a while this time of year when it's a lot more active.
So do you check that weather in the middle of the night? How does that work? If there's something that's come up that's a change, is Dan personally looking at that and saying, okay, here's the word, we need to get this out because this is potentially dangerous? Is that that pretty much right?
Well, yeah, and I would say that everyone has their own stations that they do. Some of us share radio stations that we do weather for. I may do some in Salina or Joplin or Wichita, and I may share that with Jennifer. So we both kind of keep an eye on it. But in answer to overnights, especially in the summertime, yes, there can be some very late hours knowing that something's going to come in at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. We had tornado warnings, in the month of June in the Kansas City area at 1:30 a.m. And so that, yeah, absolutely. We have to watch at all hours sometimes, and that can make a late night. So we do work in shifts. That helps out.
We've been talking about how Dan was a farm kid at about the age of 5 and wanted to get into radio, and he did it. And I find all of this absolutely amazing. And you had this dream from the time you were 5 to get into radio, and look what that's done for you. And then you've mastered that ability to be able to get into a situation where you can say, okay, let's start the storm report. And you do more of it than what you can possibly do, so you bring on an excellent staff, and it sounds to me like you're covering a good portion of the nation. Are you?
Yeah, there's quite a few areas that we cover. We do. And I to say one thing about the staff, I have, incredible people to work with. Not only are they very good at what they do on the air, but everybody is very empathetic for each other. And I say that because I had a couple of staff members who lost a parent recently. And the first thing we did was, we called each other and said, what can we do to help? Can we send food? We don't live in the same places of the country, but we did that to help each other. But they're very passionate about weather. They're all radio people. And together, that's kind of how we make this work.
It's awesome. Dan, thank you so much. I really enjoyed it, and very informative, and I enjoy listening to your staff on the radio. You take care.
Thank you. You too, Doug.